Wow, wow, wow. This is a clip of Douglas Murray on a BBC show called Question Time back in 2007. And they're talking about Israel and Hamas, because don't forget Hamas were elected soon after Israel disengaged from Gaza in 2005. And we see even back then, 20 years ago almost, Douglas had such moral clarity and has been such a friend and staunch supporter of Israel and the Jewish people. Have a watch this clip because it's very telling.
Poppy McPherson, please.
Should the West now have a more sympathetic approach to Hamas in light of their involvement in the release of Alan Johnson?
In the light of Hamas's involvement in the release of Alan Johnston, should the West now take a more sympathetic approach to them? Well, Douglas Murray, you better start on that.
Well, the answer is no. Of course not. I'd like to know who it was who was booing in the audience. I'd like to know who the Hamas supporter is in the audience here. Hamas is a terrorist organisation which makes a fetish out of the murder of Jews. And I'd like to know who it was who thought that that movement was a good thing. This, incidentally, if you don't mind Jew murder, let me tell you what these people were doing just a couple of weeks ago to their own co-religionists in the Gaza, where they went to their next-door neighbours and threw people off buildings and shot people in the back when they were running away. And you think now this is a rehabilitated organisation because they posed for the release of a journalist?
All
because
right.
they posed and organised that to look good?
Okay. So that was they're referring to Alan Johnston was referring to a BBC Gaza correspondent kidnapped in 2007. Abducted and held for 114 days and released in the early hours of 4th of July 2007. But I think, putting that to aside, even back then, one has to appreciate that, Hamas were only just really starting out to run Gaza, and it was becoming, still back then, people had these delusional hopes that somehow maybe Gaza and Israel could coexist, it could be all right. He had that moral clarity back then, and it was a lot less politically. It wasn't so much political common knowledge to be having these staunch, clear views, and the fact that he has been clear on that for a long time shows you that he's not just speaking up now when it became clearer to a lot of us, which would be easier in some ways. Even now it's difficult, but it's easier because the facts are clearer. But even back then, when still for many the whole thing was foggy and unclear, he was brave. We should all take inspiration from his courage. One of the interesting conversations I've been having there recently is someone said to me, Ollie, you present not a lot of these issues, but specifically the whole Israel-Palestine question in quite a maximalist way. Aren't you potentially going to lose people by being so clear-cut and saying that Palestinianism is inherently cynical, that it is only about Jew hatred, it's not about a genuine desire for statehood and self-determination? Aren't you going to lose people that way? And also, is that entirely true? And I give it thought because I have to tell you that certainly in my personal life and on many issues, I look for understanding complexities and nuances, and I really challenge myself. This may not always come across to you, but often in the back of my mind, I'm challenging myself and asking the questions people would say to oppose what I'm saying. So I make sure that I can refine and clarify what it is that I actually believe. But, I said at the same time, I think as a society, we've over-glorified nuance, over-glorified complexity. And, it's complicated and, you've got to understand all sides. There is a place for that sometimes. And even when there is a clear right and wrong, there can also be a place for compromise. But you know what? There are also times when there is no common ground to be found, where there is simply right or wrong, where it is maximalist, the situation. That's how it was with Hitler in World War II. There was right and there was wrong. You don't appease him. You cannot compromise with him. No, he doesn't just want a little bit more living space for Germany. He wants global domination. He wants to destroy the Jews and other minorities and other perceived political enemies. Sometimes nuance is what destroys. I have to share this with you, actually. A friend of mine just sent me this earlier, and it is deeply disturbing stuff. Have a look at this. Let me just get this up for you. So look at this. This is New York Times, Saturday, August 18th, 1934. Berlin Jewish Group for a Unified Reich. League of National German Jews urges affirmative vote in plebiscite. The League of Nation German Jews, a small Jewish organization in Berlin, is issued today a summons to all German Jews to vote for Chancellor Hitler in the plebiscite Sunday. They declared that Jews suffering in Germany had been necessary in order to clear away the damage done to un-German elements. Okay? And then there's another thing here that says, look, Berlin, November 23, wireless to the New York Times. It was confirmed today the League of National German Jews, a nationalist German organization which advocated the assimilation of Jews and urged an understanding of National Socialism, was dissolved by the secret state police on the ground that its program violated National Socialist principles. Its president, Dr. Max Norman, a former German officer, the holder of the Iron Cross, first class, bestowed only for gallantry in the front line, was arrested, but his whereabouts is unknown. Of course, utterly tragic. But I'm not saying this to compare everything to that, but I'm simply saying sometimes in those circumstances, it's amazing how the brain can say, well, you know, it's complicated, it's nuanced. They can look at something so clear, Hitler literally saying, I want to rid Germany of the Jews, and they can twist it in their mind into something else. So I'm saying that, you know what, it may seem so shocking to us that Palestinianism is inherently Nazi-esque in its ideology, inherently hateful in its ideology, but that is the truth. Yes, there's a place for nuance. There's also a place for clarity. Sometimes there is just a basic truth. There is right and there is wrong. And it's really dangerous to our lives if we don't have that kind of clarity. So I said, you know, I'm interested in sharing what I believe to be the truth. I actually was more indulgent in the idea of Palestinian autonomy or something pre-October 7th, if that just might need to be the pragmatic reality on the ground. But I try to form my opinions based on what I observe to be the reality. And that's what reality tells me, that you give an inch and you just get more terrorism, more extremism, because that's what it's clearly shown itself to be all about. And this idea that, well, you can't necessarily influence people if you hold very strong opinions. You've got to meet them halfway. Again, sometimes that might be true, and it might be true for some people, but I have to say that actually some of the most influential people in history, for good and for bad, did not compromise on their positions. They stood firm, kept saying the truth, and the public moved towards them. Think about Martin Luther King Jr. Think about Hitler in the negative. You know? I don't think it's always the case that one has to bend towards where everyone else is. Maybe in the way you speak, should speak in an understanding manner, but values don't need to be compromised. And I think Douglas Murray is a great example of that. He really is. He's been standing firm for a long time. And just as I said, the public slowly waking up and moving more towards him. A quick message before we finish. We have been lied to about the Palestinians from beginning till end. Have a watch of the trailer for our new documentary called The Invention of the Palestinians, How a Nation Was Invented to Destroy Another. And if you want to watch the full thing, just click on the link in the video description. The Palestinians. We have been told they are an ancient people fighting for their homeland which has been stolen from them. This narrative has fueled decades of conflict, painting Israel as an occupier of stolen land. But what if this identity is not of an ancient nation, but a modern, cynical invention? A political construct designed not to build a state, but to dismantle the Jewish one. In this JTV Plus documentary, we're going to uncover the truth behind the creation of the Palestinian identity. How it was forged in the fires of pan-Arabism, absent in historical records until strategically rebranded in the 1960s by leaders like Egyptian-born Yasser Arafat to rally global opposition against Israel. We'll trace its roots from the Ottoman era, where Palestine was a region without a distinct people, through the pre-1948 years of Arab rejectionism, before focusing on the pivotal shift of the 1960s when Arafat declared we should now be known as Palestinians, inventing symbols like the flag to mask genocidal aims. This wasn't about self-determination, it was about exploiting refugees, suppressing true aspirations under Arab rule, and perpetuating a war to destroy Israel. Join us as we debunk the myths of an ancient Palestinian nation, expose the strategic manipulation, and reveal how this construct has hindered peace while fueling hate. Fair but firm, this is the story of an identity weaponized not for building a future, but for erasing one. To watch this JTV Plus documentary and access much more premium content, click on the link in the video description.